This is Identity at the Center.
So you walk into organizations, how many years it take, and they have, well, I successfully onboard a couple hundred apps, but I still have like thousands that I'm not even touching, right? This is a problem that I, over and over, one of those fundamental problems that still exist. So clients, they ask me and say, Henrique, I wish it could be something like Dynatrace, just to mention another vendor here, not in identity, but you plug in and the sensor just scans things and just connects and start monitoring, right? You start monitoring things. It's kind of magic. It's kind of the way AI behaves when you're interacting with a co-pilot or something like that. Say, hey, do this, and it just scans and starts monitoring. Of course, identity is more complex than that, especially for provisioning. You guys know this, right? So the APIs, SCIM, it works sometimes. And so I think the expectation is there, something that is just like AI, perhaps I would say more like utility, right? So it's almost like a turning on the light. You don't think about what takes into like using a faucet for water to come out a tap, right? So I think if we can make identity more utility-like, I think that's what they're looking for, right? And I think that's the ask. Say, hey, I think that's the analogy I used when I joined Savin too. Is well, we still have organizations that don't have running water. That was the analogy. There's no plumbing. The basics of provisioning, user movers, joiners, and leavers, even that basic stuff is not solved. And how are we even thinking like governance with AI and security posture management, right? So I think a lot of the times discussions, they still start very basics. Hey, I need to onboard those apps.
Is
those
that a
apps
trap?
are still disconnected.
Is that a trap, Henrique? Because I find like there's a lot of companies out there that are like, oh, we've got this shiny new thing, and you're going to be able to do all this cool stuff, but it doesn't address any of the basics. And I'll probably speak for Jim here as well, but in our day jobs, we see this a lot. Like they do not have running water. They are still using fax machines and Word forms and other mechanisms, right, to do like basic IGA functionality. I just wonder if this is a trap that maybe IAM technologists get into, where they're thinking so far ahead and assuming that there are basics in place that might not be there for the vast majority of companies.
100%. I think that's happening now, right? You see a very shiny interface, like access graphs here and there, but it's like 2 steps removed from the plumbing of the problem here, right? So it assumes that you have the connectivity solved, which is not solving, right? So there's that problem, but also and I'll mention a vendor here because I think that was the right approach and I think it worked well, but I think people and other vendors are perhaps taking that example and taking the wrong direction. I'll mention Okta, right? And I think what Okta did for SAML was very intriguing, right? If you guys remember when it came first and said, yeah, we will solve SSO in a very simple way. And it's called SAML. And that was their first product, was a SAML type of thing, right? And it's like, yeah, but I have all these legacy things here, all these legacy apps. No, forget about that. We're going to solve that later. Let's focus on the SAML apps first. That's the future. Well, and then they sold a lot of that because they're selling that simplicity of SAML solving everything, right? And eventually they launched the gateway for on-premise stuff, and then it became more of and by that time they had the grasp, right, of the market around SSO and MFA.
That's right.
Very, very smart play. But I don't think, or I don't know how somebody's, well, we'll do SCIM only, right? Or we're going to do provisioning just for the cloud. All right, okay, but how you solve the rest is not like, oh, you have this one connector that is going to do everything, right? So it is not an easy to solve problem. Without getting to the details of what Savint is doing, I think it has to do with AI. I think it has to do with CI/CD pipelines as well, Terraform. We are launching solutions today that mixes both, right? A little bit of the Dynatrace discovery with the automatic or infrastructure as code capabilities of Terraform to alleviate some of that thing. But I don't think there's a there's a magic solution like SAML for provisioning. Maybe another way of looking at that is more like a better version of an RPA. And I think that's
I think you got it right, though.
Betting on.
I think you got it right with what you said there about Okta, and the approach that you laid out has always been, in my opinion, exactly what happened. In fact, when Okta first came out and that was their approach, I was like, that's never going to work because you have all these legacy apps. And I'll admit, I was the wrong one, right? I mean, organizations were willing to switch their apps. But I think the reason it sold was you said, as the practitioner, I can give 25%, or I can just give single sign-on to my cloud apps, and that's a benefit. So if you did that for your provisioning, it only covered 20%, and it just covered your cloud apps. I mean, it's different. I think the provisioning is a harder problem to solve also. I think access management has always been an easier problem to solve, and the evidence is what's out there in terms of solutions. The provisioning IGA is more complex than rolling out single sign-on.
Well, this is the key decision, though, to make, right? It's like, okay, Okta, right, was free at first. It had a really simple interface, and it was free to put in 2 or 3 apps for smaller shops at least, and so they got a foothold there. But this is a decision I think every vendor, especially new ones, have to make: is where do we start? And right now, the cloud is probably the easiest because there are more standards in place, like SAML, OpenID Connect, SCIM, new ones coming up like SSF and CAPE and things like that. Do you really want to spend your time building a on-premise Active Directory or SAP or Oracle, thing? And it is a decision every single technology vendor has had to make for like the last 10 or 15 years, maybe even longer, to say, where are we going to start?
Yeah.
And
it's hard
I think
to solve
it's
the
a
whole
great
problem.
point, especially if you think of what I said about we're in a post-cloud world, right? SAML was a solution for a cloud world. What's next? Agents, right? AI agents. So, and there are predictions saying that AI agent will kill apps. So no longer, it doesn't matter. It doesn't care what apps you have. You interact with this interface called an agent. The agent will talk to the apps, right? So maybe, and that's what I think.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.